Hi folks, it's Gary here, and a very warm welcome to the fourth official here on YouTube. Joining me for this preview of the big game this weekend between Rangers and Hearts at Ibrox from the Inside Ibrox website, and of course, us here at the fourth official is a good friend, Jack Cranmer. Jack, how are we?
Yeah, good, Gary. So a bit more positive than I was obviously last time we were on the main podcast. I mentioned this feeling a bit better, but it just seems every time we get something to give us a bit of optimism, there's then something to kind of pull it away, which I'm sure we'll touch on when we get to the press conference today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when you look at it, the international break at this time of the season is always a good place to reflect on what was seen in the first month of the season. And whilst there's been an awful lot of talk around what hasn't necessarily gone well for Russell Martin in the first few weeks of the season, the one thing he always said was, let me get to the end of the window, get the squad in place that I wanted to go with. So we've now got that. He's been backed heavily again with new players coming in on deadline day. As much as the Celtic performance had its flaws, it was certainly a lot better than what Bruges away was. Now, that's not a high bar, but it was an improvement. We need to continue to see that improvement going forward. But the hiding place is kind of now over for Russell Martin, and the time to start delivering results and not saying stick with us, give me time, can't rebuild it and overnight is all valid, but this is a results driven business, and as long as he continues not to get results, the noise will get louder and louder and louder. And where there's other factors at play as well, then what you continue to see is a kind of Russell Martin that you saw at Friday's press conference, where again he looked a bit spiky, albeit from what we've heard, he's not been overly well this week. So a 9 a.m. press call is probably not what anyone wants on a Friday, but he didn't strike me as someone first thing this morning that was full of the joys of May, and really looking forward to what is a huge game when Hearts come to Ibrox on Saturday.
Yeah, I think maybe they were trying to get in ahead of what was obviously going on during the week. What was going on during the week? They came out with Raskin that he wasn't going to be involved. I think that's probably the reason behind the early presser. I don't know if there's a different reason. I think they're wanting to get in and out ahead of this story, put their own spin on it, and kind of keep things within their own narrative. I think Martin was probably expecting the questions that he got, and I think he was not in a mood to be answering them, and that was going to kind of overtake the whole press conference, which it did really. But he's going up against, or in the fans' eyes, going up against one of the most liked players in the squad. I mean, it's not as if it's Rabbi Matondo. Or Kieran Dowell. He's having this disagreement with, whatever it may be. It's Nico Raskin, a player of the year last year, the one bright spark of last year's season, and it's just kind of, he's not going to win that battle unless he miraculously turns things around. So I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of the situation. I'm sure we've all heard rumours, and you can take as much in that as you want, but
We've all got
he's
the
here.
obligatory WhatsApp forwarded message
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
doing the rounds. And listen, there's no basis to anything like that from what
yeah,
certainly we're hearing with regards to leaking tactics to Bruges.
yeah.
And I think it's just a bit of mischief making, to be perfectly honest, on that front. But one thing is for sure, Nico Raskin is not involved for Rangers against Hearts tomorrow. And that creates a problem for Russell Martin if it's not a positive result, because that will be the first thing that gets thrown back at him if it's not a positive result is, well, why didn't you pick a player who was, again, highly influential for Belgium in the international break, scoring a goal for them. Obviously, a player who very highly thought of by the Belgian national hierarchy and all the options that they've got, and he's in and around that team World Cup year. So whilst Russell Martin can say at the press conference this morning that the issue has been resolved and that there's nothing personal, he's not using him this weekend for whatever reason that is. And what that then does is put the pressure on the 11 and the 5 substitutes that will likely be used to go out and actually deliver a performance and get Rangers up and running domestically this season against a Hearts side that have started the season very well and have got a 6-point lead over Rangers. And we were here this time 2 weeks ago when we had a game at Ibrox against a team that were 6 points ahead of us, and we finished that game still 6 behind. So it's a game where Rangers have to start making some headway.
Yeah, definitely. If you looked at the start of the season, you'd have looked at the first 3 games, that Motherwell, Dundee, St Mirren, maybe less so St Mirren, but the first 2 especially, thought, right, 6 points, chance to get a good start there ahead of the tough run of Celtic and Hearts and, of course, Hibs in the Cup. But we've blown the easier games, so now we need to kind of turn up and get the 3 points against the Hearts side that are, we know what Derek McInnes is going to do. They're going to be hard to beat. They're going to be well drilled in their tactics. They're going to have some pace on the break. They're going to, if they get the lead, they're going to manage the game. They're going to waste time at goal kicks. They're going to go down under any contact. They're going to be dangerous at set pieces. And these are all things we've struggled against with the likes of Dundee and Motherwell, who are nowhere near as good at them as Hearts and Derek McInnes are. So it's going to need to be a lot of work done. A lot of work's going to need to be done over these 2 weeks, and we're going to need to see something a lot more vibrant, a lot more intense, and a lot more ready from this Rangers team.
2 new bodies that are in the squad and expecting to probably start tomorrow. Canadian international Derek Cornelius, who had a match-winning goal for Canada against Wales during the week, firmly expecting him to come into the starting lineup. How that shapes up is to be seen. Obviously, John Souttar had a decent international break with Scotland playing on the right side of defence as opposed to on the left side. So if Cornelius comes in, does he come in as maybe a 3 at the back with Souttar and Giga, or does he go with the back 4 and either replace Souttar or Nasser Giga? I think will remain to be seen on that front, but I'm expecting to see Cornelius involved. Another option is Yusuf Chermiti, who Russell Martin was very keen to talk about his potential and how happy he is to have him in the building. Rangers obviously spent a huge amount of money on Yusuf Chermiti, and you can see an interview that I had with Mike Richards from the Unholy Trinity Everton podcast around what Yusuf Chermiti can bring to the table for Rangers here on the Fourth Official YouTube channel. But do you expect to see him right in from the start? And if so, is that at Majovski's expense, or is it alongside Majovski? There's a lot of unknowns, I think, when you look at that Rangers starting lineup.
Yes, so I didn't expect many tactical changes for the first game, but after the press conference where it was mentioned about a striking duo, and obviously Felwell mentioned about maybe going to 3 at the back just around transfer deadline day, I actually do expect it to go a 3 at the back. I think Cornelius will be there, and I think Giga will be there. The question for me is whether we go with Souttar at the back or James Tavernier comes on at the sort of right hand side of that 3. Would be the question for me. I know Martin likes Souttar, but I just haven't been convinced so far this season. I like John Souttar as well, but I just as good as he was for Scotland, I've not seen that form in a Rangers shirt this year. I think if you're going to play the 3 at the back, you need the 2 up top. Otherwise, you're just going to be overly congested in midfield. If you're playing the 4 across the middle and then the 3 up top, it's going to be a lot. I don't know. I don't see him going for a diamond, so I guess you'd have 2 wingers and 2 midfielders. It just seemed a bit much for me. So I imagine it would be a 3-5-2. So that would make space for both Chermiti and Miovski up front. And I would like to see how they play together. Miovski's obviously talented in the area. He's got a lot of goals for Aberdeen, playing up front with Sockler, I believe, and someone else before that whose name escapes me. But he has experience playing the 2. Chermiti, from what I've heard, his main strengths are getting involved in the play, bringing others into it. So if he can be, the Kenny Miller to Miovski's Chris Boyd, I would be more than happy with that if he's doing all the work outside the box. And then we've got the big proven goal scorer in there to get an end of things.
That then leaves the question of how that midfield shapes up, and Thilo Asgard off the back of 4 goals for Norway and a crushing win for them over Moldova during the week. Quite incredible, 4 goals as a substitute within 22 minutes. He was the player presented to the media this morning, which usually is a bit of a clue that he's going to be involved. And interestingly, he spoke a lot about his preference to play as the kind of left-sided 8, and I think that was an area that I think we all expected him probably to be in the side, so kind of where Nico Raskin was out of position at the beginning of the season, and what we expected when Asgard got fit, that was where we'd likely see him, as opposed to maybe in the 10 or even up front, which we've seen him so far. So interesting to see how that lines up, and if that is the case, then who plays as a 6? If it's Connor Barron, who was very industrious in that Old Firm game, or if it goes back to Joe Rothwell, and then you've got probably Mohamed Diamande as the right-sided 8, or Lyle Cameron.
Yeah, I imagine it'll be Diamande and Asgard there. Asgard coming off, he had a mixed game against Celtic. He done well off the ball, was quite poor on the ball, but you don't drop a guy who just scored 4 goals during the week. I think you try and keep that confidence rolling. I imagine Diamande, who did quite well against Celtic, probably starts alongside him, but there's always this fear with Diamande coming off a game like that he's going to drop back down for the run-of-the-mill domestic game, although he has had a few decent performances against Hearts. Now, the 6 is a big question. I think it comes down to 2 things. Conor Barron was good against Celtic, but like you said, it was industrious. He was winning the ball back. He was, sitting deep, breaking things up. I think Joe Rothwell would be the ideal player for this game against a Derek McInnes side where he can maybe pick that pass that unlocks him, play that ball that we've seen him do for Southampton and for Leeds over the last couple of years. But I think the question is fitness. He clearly wasn't fit. I don't know if it was an injury or something else going on in the early parts of the season, but it remains to be seen if that's been addressed and dealt with over these 2 weeks where he's had a few days off. He's had some training with a smaller group. He's had time with the physios. You know what I mean? It should be that should have been identified, and we'll see where the start lineup tomorrow where that's been sorted. But if he's fit, Rothwell has the capabilities to make a real difference in that game, whereas Barron is more of a guy you maybe want to bring on for the last 15, 20 minutes when you're trying to maybe if you need to hold something out or just try to manage the game time wise.
Yeah, not a playmaker as Connor Barron, but probably a bit more, certainly a lot more energetic and a bit more maybe defensively sound. So I think it depends how Rangers want to play in the transitions as to whether or not that's a skill set that's more appreciated. I think the one thing that we certainly saw in that Celtic game was the makeup of that midfield, where it was a bit more of a kind of 2 6s and a 10 type formation in that midfield. But if you're going to a kind of 3-5-2, then that shape probably looks a little bit differently. And then what do you do with your wide players? Do you continue with Gassama? Do you continue with Mikey Moore? Do you bring back Ant-Man? Have you get Tav playing a bit further forward? So there's loads of variables, and I think that's the thing that makes tomorrow quite unpredictable. But the one thing you can certainly predict is that it's a must-win game for Russell Martin to start to build up some momentum to try and get the fans on side. And given the fact that we've got Hibs coming up next weekend and a vital League Cup game, that building momentum and trying to create a bit of positivity around the place is massively needed.
Yeah, I mean, I have my concerns about Russell Martin, like I'm sure every Rangers fan does. I'm not quite in this get him out sort of phase. I can see it going that way. I can see things not really going our way, but I would like to see him turn it around. I like to believe there is a way back for him in this season, but it needs to start tomorrow. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in that situation we had under Michael Beale, where he lost to Celtic, and even though we won a few games afterwards, it was just kind of waiting for the next bad result. And when it came against Aberdeen, there was no hiding place. He needs to go on a run, and it needs to be a long run, because we beat Hearts, we beat Hibs, beat Livingston, and then drop points away at Falkirk. It's just going to kick back off again. It needs to be a consistent run. Realistically, we need to go on a domestic winning run till New Year or maybe a League Cup final. I mean, if you get edged out in a close game against Celtic, people are going to be annoyed, people are going to be raging, but it's understandable. As poor as they look as if they're going to be, if you're dropping points every 3 or 4 weeks to your Falkirks, your Dundees, your Dundee Uniteds, even your Aberdeens, they're just waiting for the next bad result for the pressure to spike up again.
Yep, absolutely. Full coverage of the Hearts game here on the Fourth Official over on our Patreon channel. If you're not yet a subscriber over there, why the hell not? You can join us. It's www.patreon.com/the Fourth Official. You can join us for less than £3 per month over there. You get access to all of our audio podcasts, our match reaction, opinion columns, and exclusive interviews. So yeah, please come and join us. Loads more content over there throughout the season, and also here over on our YouTube channel as well, and loads coming up over here as well, including in the next couple of weeks an exclusive interview with former Rangers striker Marco Negri, and the big preview of the Europa League game against Genk with, again, our friend Scott from the Belgian Football Podcast. So keep it tuned to us here at the Fourth Official. And also, if you are on the Twitter X platform, please drop inside Ibrox FS follow. Over there, you can see all of Jack and our brand new podcaster, Brian's coverage on there. David Marshall, also from the Heart and Hand Network. Loads of good stuff over there as well. So please check that out if you don't do so already. Thank you very much for watching. We'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.